Hi, Idil. First of all, I want to say a big thank you to you for taking your time to speak to me and to Layali Arts Center in Bahrain. First, I want to say that Idil is my really dear friend from CID, which is the Dance Council, part of UNESCO. And we met, I believe, a few years ago in Paris.
Yes.
And since that day, you became a really close friend to mine. And I hope one day we will be able again to, spend physically time together,
Yes.
for coffees and have our long talks. So I would like to explain first that you are a president of the Dance Council in Turkey, in Istanbul. And you have been in this position for a while, and I have to admit that you're doing very, very well. Good job in that.
Thank you so much.
So would you like to say something about yourself, just to introduce?
Yes, my dear Maria, thank you so much for your invitation to do this podcast together. It's a great pleasure and honor to be hosted by you and Layali Arts Center. Yes, both of us connected a few years ago and started a friendship quickly. I have also Balkan origins, so we got inspired by each other as a young artist woman. Also, usually with CID UNESCO, there is a democratic election where in your city, if you are elected by other artists, you become the president of that section. In my case, I was made the attended president of the CID section in Istanbul because there was a small transformation and kind of absence of the Turkish artists at CID during that period. But I also admit that I have been a very active member and extremely active in networking, collaborating, and hosting many artists from different countries in my city of Istanbul.
Well, I hope that one day we will be, once we are back to the normality, we'll be able to be part of your festivals in Istanbul and part of your projects. I cross fingers for that.
That is what I wished very much, actually. Like I told you last year, it would be an honor to host your ballet work in the city of Istanbul, and that the people of Istanbul will be so excited and can appreciate your work.
Yes, well, honestly, we in Bahrain, I can say we are pretty much connected to the Istanbul, because for every holiday, every Eid, I think one of the first destinations that we always kind of book ticket to go is Istanbul, because we have one flight around 4 hours from Bahrain. And then obviously the culture, the food, it's just for us as a first destination. So basically, because of that, I wanted to host this podcast, as you said, to a little bit, let's say that to learn something new about Istanbul, and not just basically what is just represented to us in the social media. There's so much more behind in the history.
Yes.
So one of the subjects that you kind of suggested to me, and I was really interested about, is well, it happened more than 100 years ago now, and it's connected to the Russia and Russian immigrants and Istanbul, Turkey, and most of these immigrants, they were basically artists, and they were actually aristocrats in Russia. So I'm sure that it had a big impact of the cultural scene in Istanbul in that time. And honestly, for me, I just found it very interesting as a subject because, wars, they were always happening, unfortunately, our history. And, the people, anyhow, they survive and they find a way to continue normal life and to continue creating and doing. So, yes, I found the subject very interesting, and I'm sure that you can give me much more information, about details and interesting stories that happened more than 100 years ago.
Yes. It's a fascinating topic, especially as a performance artist in Istanbul, and the legacy the White Russians left, I can say, as a modern Turkish woman. It is an amazing symbolic heritage as an artist in my city. So we can start with a little bit about the historical background information. When White Russians came to Istanbul, this wasn't just a random events of happening, because during this time, both the Russian Empire and both the Ottoman Empire were experiencing their last few years. So they were taking their last breaths, let's say, especially the Ottoman Empire. Because Russian Empire, actually, what happened with the Bolshevik Revolution in 1917, it actually already put a symbolic end to the Russian Empire. And today, the heritage of White Russian artists, especially of women, are very much spoken about and represented in our pop culture works. For example, in the TV series Midnight at Para Palace, this is a Turkish Netflix series available to other countries as well. One of the, so they are doing time travel to this exact time period in the TV series. And one of the main characters says, "Do you see that woman? She was my mother. She was a Russian princess who escaped from the Bolsheviks and who was working at the Para Palace Hotel." So the figure of like a Russian aristocrat, probably they were either a baroness or a countess, but the Turkish public referred to them as a Russian princess, that figure actively working in Istanbul was definitely a captivating and touching symbolic figure. But what is interesting is that actually not just artists or some aristocratic women came here. The whole White Army with its generals, commanders, and soldiers came to Istanbul. So one of your questions was that why is this history erased or not so visible? The cultural part is very visible in Turkey, but the militaristic part, the fact that the White Army was here, is completely erased. Like, I came across it in this research, but not in our popular culture works. You can come across this.
Interesting. Yes, that's honestly. I mean, okay, obviously, like probably one part of the history. I mean, sometimes the government or however they want us to kind of skip it or forget it because of the many reasons. But I think the history is something that really speaks, and
Yes,
can even predict the future in some certain point. Like
yes,
what can happen again. And this is just, as I say, one small part of the history in Turkey, especially of Ottoman Kingdom and Russia as well. We speak of
yes.
Russia, it's a historical country.
Yes. So your first question was why the White Russians came to Istanbul as refugees. Why not some other country? The first reason is the geographic proximity, obviously. Even like 50 years ago, before White Russians, the Cherkess community came to the Ottoman Empire as refugees, because you just need to cross the Black Sea. Like, it's not a great destination, so easily they could make this trip. And because of the geographic proximity, the White Russians follow the same route. But more importantly, there was a political reason. Istanbul at the time, when White Russians came here, they were under the occupation of the Allied forces. So they were under the occupation of the British and French empires. And obviously, White Russians were also their allies. The Bolshevik Revolution changed all of that. So suddenly, White Russians, from being one of the victors of World War I, they became a displaced social class. So they were received by their former allies, the British and the French, especially British. They were in Istanbul. So the Ottoman Turkish writers at the time, they tried to capture that whole scene, the entertainment quarters, which involved like British soldiers and like White Russians, and kind of chaotic but also eventful nightlife which was happening at the time in Istanbul. So White Russians did not come to like a stable Turkish republic, let's say. They came approximately 5 years before the official announcement of the Turkish Republic. They came to a country where there were three separate powers. So the British, the Allied forces, the Ottoman Sultan, and the young Turkish revolutionaries, which were fighting both for the sovereignty of the land and sovereignty of the people. So it was really a dynamic time, you know.
Basically, how much significant was the presence of the Russian refugees in that time in all that house, right, in Istanbul? What was really like? What did they bring with them? Like, what did they make a difference?
Yes, it had a great significance culturally rather than militarily or politically, let's say. For example, the presence of the White Army was not seen as immediately advantageous by the British. In fact, it was considered a problem to solve because the maintenance of this army was difficult economically. And the army members also started working ordinary jobs. So one of the Turkish writers records that it was fascinating to see, let's say, a bodyguard in one of the fancy or elite nightclubs with the uniform of the Russian Tsar. So the huge gap between the symbolic and cultural capital the White Russians brought and their actual economic reality was huge. And what touched the population of Istanbul was that cultural and symbolic surplus, which they welcomed with great interest, let's say. So among the people who came were aristocrats who had education about music and dance. So they presented a type of embodied capital, like even though maybe they could bring small money from their country, in their body and mind, they carried the information of how to play the piano, how to do modern sorts of acrobacy, or the most important thing is considered their lifestyles, because it was mixed gender, more mixed between men and women in public space, and some of the fashions they had. They brought some new games, for example, tombala. Tombala is the, you know, right? They could bring their cultural lifestyle here. So they immediately entered the business of like nightclubs, cafes, restaurants. It was not just entertainment. Of course, they served their own cuisine. The short haircuts by Russian ladies, this became fashionable. Also in Istanbul, people used to separate the swimming areas of women and men. This was called the sea bath, and it was a wooden closed-off structure. But Russian ladies, they could sunbathe freely with the men. So this attracted great interest from the public. Interestingly enough, the I want to show you actually, because this is the type of subject I teach. For example, traditional, I will, yes, switch the.
Mhm.
So the traditional Turkish theater was done in public space and it was improvised. So
Interesting.
there was no Western type of stage or Italian stage. It started with belly dance actually in the city center or in a park. And immediately when the public heard like belly dance music, they gathered there because it announced this type of traditional theater is starting in Istanbul. And once the dancer went away, the actors came. And it was 100% based on free improvisation. So rather than memorize the text, you had to be sharp about outsmarting audience members. For example, this continued until mid 20th century. And the last maestro of this tradition says, it's so different than Western, you will see. So it's a big public watching, right? And they are improvising verbally jokes and nuances. One audience member throw cucumber to the stage area, and the actor said, "Hey, sir, you dropped your ID." So uh, rather than freeze or be embarrassed or get angry, they were supposed to outsmart the interaction with the audience. And because our nervous system, it can make us freeze or like fight. Some people might get angry. Some people might like flee. But this art was about remaining cool and verbally outsmarting the interaction with regular people.
So in some certain point, maybe we can say that the improvisation theater started from the streets of Istanbul. Can we say that?
Exactly, because I believe our culture is still like this. It's very dynamic type of street culture. But like I will mention it a little bit now. With the introduction of Western type of theater, so memorizing everything, entering a private space, so it's not on the streets, right? Or the fourth wall between people and the disciplining of the audience. So the Turkish state immediately, the Ottoman state immediately tried to control the audience behavior once they built like big theater buildings. So it's very funny. But I also wanted to show you, for example, to mention a little bit the context White Russians entered in. In this type of traditional theater, you see these are all the different ethnicities which crossed from Istanbul. So this theater was like a mirror of the cultural diversity of Istanbul, representing all characters. For example, I am Cherkess from one side, Caucasian. One of the actors dress up as a Caucasian, and they kind of demonstrate in a humorous way, right? Characters associated with them. Here they have, like, for example, the Arabic character, the European, they say the Frenchman. The Jewish character, Istanbul had a significant Jewish heritage, I guess similar to the Balkans. The Persian, there were like many different characters. So Istanbul's people were used to artistic depiction of different nationalities or religious groups or ethnic groups. So arrival of a brand new population is not so shocking, essentially they can Maybe this is partly why it was a good interaction and it worked. They could immediately enter the culture life.
How the local people, uh, how did they react to these changes? Did they have any
Reaction, you mean? So,
exactly? Like, did they kind of accept it, like in a way, like okay, we welcome the new things to our culture, or they were like, oh no, why this is happening? We need to still keep like traditional way. How was reaction?
the culture revolutions or transformations mirrored political changes. There were many reactions against political changes, like, for example, the modernization of the army. This attracted great backlash from the Janissaries, the traditional army lodges. But the culture life did not attract these reactions. On the contrary, people were extremely interested. Of course, I also wanted to talk about this actually. For example, we said the White Russians started coming in 1917, right? Officially, and they became more visible in 1918. They are written in history to liberalize greatly, Istanbul's culture life. But if really they made such permanent transformation in gender roles, then why someone like Afife Jale, who was the first Turkish Muslim woman on a Western type of theater stage, she was harassed so much by Ottoman police because it was illegal in the specific regulation of the Ottoman Sharia at the time for a Muslim woman to be an actress on a Western type of stage. If you're an Armenian or Christian woman, you could do it. If you're a Jewish woman, you could do it. It was legal. You could become professional artist, but Muslim women, they couldn't. It was illegal. And this happened, this Afife Jale's experience, like 3 years after the White Russians came. So perhaps it's such a short time, of course, for permanent effect, but it wasn't like immediately everything was transformed. Local people, like the Turkish Muslim people, never paid a price or sacrifice. Immediately they could sunbathe, they could, it wasn't, of course, so dramatic or so quick. I mean, naturally.
Yeah, but in this case, do you, how, for example, then the Russian woman, like how they're actually pictured in the media and society? Like you just said right now that basically the main issue was if the Turkish Muslim woman wants to, let's say, express herself or change something, that was much more bigger deal than an actual, let's say, Christian or white woman, right? Like anybody like from Russia, from Western, would do the same thing basically as her, but would be seen completely, as a normality. While, for example, the Muslim woman would be seen as, haram, as something that is really doing. So how they actually, in this case, media and society, so in realistic way, in honest way, how did they see the white woman and Russian woman and Russian artists and artists? Like how did they see them? How did they picture them?
The thing is, for example, the people mentioned, like the Ottoman citizens, let's say, the Armenian and Greek citizens, they were not coded as whiter than the Muslim population, rather than color-based categorizations. Of course, you know this. The nationality, like not the current meaning of nationality, but the way Ottomans conceptualized nations, this was completely about religion. So rather than colorism, it was about who belongs to which religion. For example, some Turks went to Greece because they were coded as Christian. I mean, they were Christians, they were Greek Orthodox Christians, but they were not Greeks, they were Central Asians. They moved to Greece because for the Ottoman gaze, Ottoman conceptualizations, they were not Turkish because religion was more important than ethnic blood, let's say.
Yes, yes, I understand.
So, or some Muslim, like some Slavic people, like Pomak in Bulgaria, they could be coded as Turkish, but they are not. They are Slavic, but they're Muslim. So they have their unique concepts. They are considered a minority there. Anyhow, the Russians in the media, it's like we need to check which exactly news articles, but some were positive because even though they lost their status in their country, they were considered high status in Turkey, even if they had the economic status of a working class person. They still carried the embodied symbolic culture capital. So it was a fascination, but there were moralizing newspaper pieces as well. And the moralizing things were mostly about of course, this is an interesting point again, which we can discuss. For example, in USA, the seductress is usually portrayed as a darker woman, perhaps a Muslim woman, like belly dancer type, or a Latin American woman. But in Ottomans and Turkey, usually the innocent woman is a Muslim woman, and the seductress is like a whiter woman, let's say,
Yeah.
or another religion. Who can embody perhaps the sensual side of woman in the performing arts more freely than perhaps the Muslim woman is restricted to express this in her home, not in public space. So the woman who is allowed to express this in the public space is coded. Usually it is a Greek woman, actually. So again, it's not about color, but it's a Greek beauty, let's say.
And let's call it as a nationality, as a cultural, right? Yeah.
Yes.
What would you say that, I mean, can you actually say, did this historical situation happening, again, more than 100 years ago, did it have an impact on actual performing art scene woman in the culture in Istanbul, in Turkey, right now? What would you say that it changed or it didn't change, or it's like, what would you say?
For example, this is not my research area, but from the small information I read, because people who knew about ballet techniques, like ballet teachers, came to Istanbul, they trained many generations, as far as I read. Again, this is not my field, but it is directly linked to your professional as a wonderful ballerina.
Yes, if you talk about the Russians, I mean, they definitely spread the Vaganova Russian school in many countries. Same for Serbia. We had Russian teachers here, and when I studied it when I started, I also studied the Russian technique. So it kind of, I mean, obviously they had a big influence. Now, even in Iran in the 60s, like Irani theater was basically in the time collaborating with the Russian theaters and artists, and they had a big impact, right? So Russians definitely brought good things, right? Like to all of us.
Of course.
But for me, it's like right now, where is the woman right now? Let's forget about the classical ballet. Let's talk about the dancing woman. Where is now in Istanbul, in Turkey culture? Are they free to do that? Are they free to dance? Are they free to express themselves? or there is still a little bit of restrictions?
For example, absolutely not, in my opinion. Of course, because this is my life, I think a lot about this. And actually, what got me nominated to CID was my activism, because it had spread on Facebook years ago. The thing is, here we do not have like arts education. We have, but it is not exactly democratized, and it does not reach the masses so successfully. So for sure, we can say that the right of the average child to receive arts education, that is not so healthily functioning. So the type of dances Turkish women might be inclined to, for example, there is even a theater play. I attended this like 2-3 days ago. It's called The Belly Dancer, and it is exactly about this. So it's about this young girl who is born in Gecekondu Mahallesi. This means like the favelas of Brazil, right? We in Turkey also have these neighborhoods, but the difference is here they are officialized, legalized, and regularized across decades, so they can receive all public infrastructure. Those neighborhoods are not excluded from public life, but as they were forming, the population there, yes, they had difficulties accessing the democratic rights which they are entitled to. So in this play, the girl is born in like a Turkish favela, let's say, and of course, she maybe does not have a stable family structure. She cannot reach basic rights of education. So a child's rights to family stability and education, they are violated. But because of TV, so again, a mass media, a popular culture organ, she sees belly dance. And because this is also kind of our historical culture, she can develop herself from watching artists there. But the third step, where will this woman perform and earn money healthily? For example, I think in Istanbul, of course, it's a giant city. There can be many different, it's the center of, for example, the production of TV series, right? Like, so it's the center of many industries.
After a few years, I mean, it's really like I mean, in Serbia, I don't know the person that doesn't watch one series, and I'm sure in Bahrain as well.
So Istanbul, I think, has more creative opportunities, but the play is set in Ankara. Ankara is wonderful city, the heart of Turkish Revolution, but they also have like this culture called pavilion culture. Actually, it's not so much linked to belly dance at all, because belly dance was the dance of the Ottoman palace, and it was also a Mediterranean dance. So it's not so native to Ankara. They have their own expressions of dances. But let's say pavilion is a place where, how to say, it's usually only men go there. It's usually men from neighboring small villages. Let's say a guy who owns a field can go there. And because usually this guy has no access to like a modern lifestyle woman, there he can socialize with, let's say, a woman dressed in modern clothing, and who will talk with him in like a poetic way, like the modern flirting, which people do in cities.
Yeah.
Rural guys go there for that experience. And for example, in that play, the girl is working in such a place. Again, her rights for safe work is violated. So you see this violation of her rights over and over again. In her family, in education, Then as a worker, because despite all odds, this woman became a successful dancer, not like an ordinary person who can do two or three moves. She became a performer. So she succeeded despite everything. But is the society providing safe conditions for that labor? I don't believe so. And for example, the way I perform, it's when there is a cachet and it's very secular, safe, and A plus audience. But the majority of girls, they have no cachet. They rely on customer tips. So it's even worse than before, I think, this type of entertainment in belly dance. I'm talking about in Istanbul. But if you're an acrobat, maybe you can get a regular job with a cachet, or if I think acrobacy and belly dance are the two most popular entertainment forms. So I don't think like a regular girl who is doing this type of job is researching about White Russians and
definitely no, but I think also the subject that we are talking today, I really think that not so many people actually really know about the subject. And I think, in my personal opinion, I think the subject is very interesting because it definitely did have an impact before, and I think it had impact even now because obviously, like as you say, I think in general the dance scene, if you talk about, we spoke about this even in the CAB like 2 years ago in Paris. I think we still need to work on basically on our position in this world, that the artists should earn money, should have pension, should have, there's so many legal things that we need to work on, and I hope it will change, not only for dance but also for us as the dancers. And even the ballet right now, as a classical ballet, is not really in a safe place, because so many dancers finish the schools and they don't have jobs, or they cannot find a job. And once they find a job, they cannot get paid properly from the theater because there is an older artist. They cannot go to the pension because basically the government will make a law that once they are 40, 41, they go regularly to the pension, right? So we don't have enough contracts to give to these young dancers. They need to start earning and making the families. So yeah, I mean, it's a loop. I think this is another subject that we need to have video. But thank you so much for this conversation and for this info. I find this information very interesting. I hope people in Bahrain will find it as well. And yes, I mean, I really hope that everything goes back to the normal in Bahrain, and then hopefully we can be organizing some dance festival in the future and have you as a guest, as a jury. I wish you really, really all the best, and I'm looking forward for the next subjects that we are going to film.
Yes, all my heart goes to the wonderful people of Bahrain, and I hope everyone is in a safe situation soon. All my love to you.
Thank you, love. Thank you so much. See you soon, hopefully. Istanbul or Bahrain?
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Bye.